So I've got Moby with me. How fun and exciting is that? And we are in LA. I'm from Chicago, so I just thought we'd do it outside because, gosh, it's beautiful. So thanks for having me here. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
So we're going to get to all the animal work very shortly. We know, like, vegan extraordinaire. That's why he's on Awesome Vegans, because he is so awesome. So we're going to get to the detail of all the animal work, but I quickly just wanted to ask you some music questions because, of course, you give so much to us through music as well. So I've interviewed so many artists over the years, and they all seem to have their own style of working. Some lock themselves in a closet 4 hours a day, some keep yellow stickies everywhere. I'm wondering if you have a way of working that works for you.
I don't know that I do, to be honest. Meaning, like, I don't have any sort of, like, set pattern or process. Because I know, yeah, what you're describing, like, there's some musicians who will take like 3 months and isolate themselves and only work on music, and I will make pancakes and then go to my studio and work on music, and then go read a book and go back to my little studio and then go play piano, play guitar. So it's like, in a way, and this might sound sort of self-aggrandizing or like I'm making more of it than it is, but it reminds me a little bit of I remember reading about an anthropologist who went to an island somewhere in the South Pacific, and he was studying the people living on this island, and after being there for a while, he asked them, he said, "So where are your churches?" And they were confused. They're like, "What do you mean?" And he's like, "Well, where are your places of worship? Where do you go to worship?" And they were like,
"All over the place."
Everywhere. Like, and he was like, "Oh," and I was like, that makes so much sense. As opposed to an hour a week of worship, for them everything was an extension of worship. And so the way that I work, it's an integrated part of my life. So it's not like compartmentalizing work and separating it from anything else.
So you're maybe constantly writing things down as they come to you?
And also at this point, like, music isn't my job.
Right.
You know,
okay,
I mean, it is, I still occasionally do things professionally, but like, I don't tour. I don't really expect to make money from music. I mean, the record I put out most recently, 100% of any revenue around the record goes to animal rights organizations. So I work on music because I love music. You know, I'm not trying to advance a career. I'm not trying to sell records or sell tickets. I just love doing it.
I always think that artists, even though their lives are difficult, in a way they're so lucky because they know their purpose in life, and you almost don't have a choice. So many people struggle with, what should I do, or where can I have an impact, or every day you know exactly where you make an impact and how you can contribute.
Yeah, I mean, I would take slight issue with the idea that artists' lives are difficult. I think most artists, musicians, etc., are basically self-indulgent adolescents. You know, like, because I've had, in the course of my life, I mean, and yes, sometimes it's challenging, you know, like going on tour for a long period of time, being away from home, but like, I've had bad jobs, and I have friends who have bad jobs.
This isn't one of them.
No musician should ever complain. You know, they're like, "Oh, it's so hard, I have to write a song." I was like, you know, there are people who don't have enough to eat. You know, there are people manning toll booths 9 hours a day, 5 days a week for their entire life. Like,
and then they drive Uber. Yeah,
if you want to complain, be a toll booth operator. You know, go be a sanitation worker, go work at a needle exchange, you know, do something. Like, I try really hard to not complain about any of the rigors of being a musician, because the truth is, it's not that rigorous.
Well, you've sort of led me to a nice segue in a way. You were talking about how you work all the time. It's just always around you. And I find, as somebody who's not creative, I'm on constant sensory overload, particularly with more and more tech and more apps, and I'm using them all and sort of driving myself crazy with them all. I'm on constant sensory overload. And how do you protect yourself from that, if you feel that at all?
I mean, that's sort of working under the assumption that I do protect myself from it.
If you do at all, yes.
And I would like to be able to say that, like, oh, I take tech Sabbath and I have, you know, 1 day a week that I don't use anything electronic. But like, I'm like you, like everybody, like, give me 5 minutes and I'll pick up my phone and start playing around with it. I think maybe years of therapy and different other sort of like meditative practices, I have a tiny bit of self-awareness. So I know when something isn't working for me, you know. And sometimes when, like, for example, if I'm all like addled and agitated, rather than assume that thoughts are making me addled and agitated, it might simply be that I've had 6 cups of coffee, I haven't been outside, I haven't talked to my friends, I haven't done something I love, like I've just been like drinking coffee and like reading about Trump destroying the world, and like, so sometimes the answer is really simple, like, you know, when I'm all agitated, it's like, go for a hike, you know, play piano, like really simple things.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And in LA, we can do those things. I'm from Chicago, so good solid 9 months out of the year you can't. But here you can kind of walk out.
Yeah, I mean, Chicago, I love Chicago. I've been there so many times, but like, it is really fascinating to me that it's one of the only cities in the world where in the winter people are in danger of freezing to death, and in the summer they die from the heat.
Yeah.
Like, how that's even like most places in the world are either cold or hot, not extremes of both.
We got it all.
Yeah.
And great music town, of course, as we all know. So it's funny, when I think of DJing, and that's what you're going to do May 12th. We're going to the Vegan Prom, people. He's DJing. Humane League's Vegan Prom in LA. We're so excited. I'll be wearing taffeta. When I think of DJing, I think of the joy, but of playing other people's music. And I'm wondering how that joy compares to writing your own music or writing a storyline of music for somebody else, like a movie. And you do a lot of that.
I mean, DJing, it's funny because, you know, my background as a musician was very odd. I grew up playing classical music, and then I played in punk rock bands, and I came to DJing when I was around 19 or 20. You know, I was a college dropout, and I was broke, and I needed work, and this guy let me play records in his bar Monday nights, and he paid me $20. I was like, great, I can be in music and I can make $20. So DJing, again, it's not my real job. I don't think I have a real job, but DJing, it's fun, and I don't take it too seriously, because really, you know, there can be artistry to it, but ultimately you're playing other people's records,
right,
you know, and nowadays, because I'm not trying to advance my career as a DJ, like, I don't need to prove to anyone how cool or credible I am as a DJ. Like, I'm perfectly happy playing Beyonce and Van Morrison, if that's what people want to hear.
Well, this is lucky for me, because I'm going to be requesting disco on May 12th. It's where I shine,
well,
actually.
It's a prom, that's, of course. You know, like, no one goes to a prom to hear, like, deep underground obscure cuts. Like, you go to hear, like, you know, Casey and the Sunshine Band.
Which I'll be dancing to. I'm very excited about that. So you said in your video, Porcelain, a memoir, that DJing is actually what got you your first record label job, which is amazing that DJing could bring you to that. You also said in that video, which I highly recommend everybody's on your website, that you had the emotion of shame growing up, and that was your primary emotion. And I'm wondering, what's your primary emotion now?
Yeah, I mean, growing up, because I grew up very poor in a very wealthy town. You know, my mom and I were on food stamps and welfare in a town filled with CEOs and, you know, presidents of corporations. And my mom also dated really scary guys, you know, Hell's Angels and drug dealers. So,
oh, your mama.
So I grew up with a lot of shame and a lot of fear. I think so the question is my main emotion now. I think is, I don't know if it's an emotion, but it's like sort of baffled curiosity. And I don't know how, like, almost everything we do is sort of contextualized by the fact that we live in a universe that we know nothing about. You know, I mean, and it's the height of presumptuousness to say that we even know anything about ourselves. You know, like, the moment someone can tell me how a fingernail cell comes to be, that's when you know yourself. So until you can describe how eating, you know, brown rice and black beans becomes a fingernail cell, an optic nerve, the inside of your tooth. Like, when you understand that process, then I'll listen to someone who tells me about what the universe is like. But until that, we are utterly, paradoxically separated from the universe. The paradox being, we're also 100% a product of the universe and an extension of the universe.
And affecting it all the time.
So my emotion is sort of, I guess, like either lighthearted or dark-hearted bafflement. You know, sometimes it's joyful bafflement where it's like, oh, I have no idea what's going on, but it's really interesting and beautiful. And other times it's like, I have no idea what's going on. How can we be alive and exist happily when we're so disconnected from everything on a really sort of like core ontological level?
I would agree with that. I spend most of my days in utter amazement. Sometimes in good utter amazement and sometimes in bad utter amazement. I find myself often saying, just like the Talking Heads song, how did we get here? How did this all happen? I speak politically as well as biologically, etc. So turning to animals, and you mentioned it before, I want to give it a big plug here. So Everything Was Beautiful and Nothing Hurt, your current album out, 100% of the profits go to animal organizations. You work with so many, and you've been just a veteran vegan, I'll call you. Can you list the ones that you work with and that you support?
Yeah, I mean, and it's a little tricky because there are so many remarkable rescue organizations, and so I hate to say this, I can't, and I love them and the work that they do, but there's so many of them, and they really require a lot of funding, and I applaud the people who fund them, but my focus is legislation.
Agreed.
Legislation, health, and we'll call, for lack of a better word, media. You know, so Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, they're one of my favorites.
Neil Barnard, I love him. I love you, Dr. Barnard.
And Mercy for Animals.
Love you, Mercy for Animals.
Humane Society, specifically the Humane Society Legislative Fund. You know, because my interest is, how do we change the way in which we relate to animals and use animals with a tiny budget, you know? And so I want to spend the money that I have trying to really move the lever. So I love the idea of saving a cow. That's a beautiful thing. But there are 100 billion animals being killed every year by and for humans. I feel like we need to change the legislative landscape, the human landscape. I mean, thinking like civil rights. Like, in the mid-20th century, it was great to work on one person's civil rights case. But when you pass the Civil Rights Act, when you pass the Civil Rights Amendment, that's when real change happens. So I'm hoping to use what limited funds I have to accomplish something similar.
And have you seen things, because this has been your interest since 1987, have you seen things change? Where are you on that emotional needle of the future of humanity?
When I was a vegan in 1987, no one knew how to pronounce the word vegan. You know, you'd go to a vegan restaurant and someone would say like vegan, vegan, and there, to put it in perspective, there are more vegan restaurants in a 5-mile radius of my house in Los Angeles than there were in the entire world in 1987. So clearly, many, many things are changing for the positive, but 100 billion animals are still killed by and for humans every year. So there's cause for optimism, but there's also cause for despair. You know, I mean, we have to work harder than ever. But it's also, what we've seen lately is that systemic change can happen very quickly. You know, an example being like marriage equality.
Yes, I see.
You know, like, beginning of Obama's term, no one was talking about marriage equality. End of Obama's term, same-sex couples could get married.
Done.
You know, I mean, you look at lots of other movements that now can sort of progress at such an accelerated way. And so I feel like the use of animals for food will change very quickly as well. Because there are certain almost like institutional props that are holding up the animal agriculture industry, specifically subsidies.
Right.
And if you can go to the European community, if you can go, you know, like Congress, maybe at some point, and say, look, just let animal products cost what they cost. Stop subsidizing them. You know, but without subsidies, a family of 4 at McDonald's would cost about $80. A gallon of milk, $25. A pound of beef, $40. So, first step, if we can end subsidies, and the use of animals for food, like, would go down about 90%.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and then of course when you do that, you're also increasingly having these health costs because you're subsidizing food that isn't good for people, and so then you have not only the cost of the subsidies but the cost of the health issues that you're
absolutely right. It's sort of like, you know, there's the direct subsidies, which is the money that's paid to the big agribusiness companies. Then there's the indirect subsidies, which is subsidizing alfalfa, corn, wheat, soybeans, and the oil, the land, all these other things. But then it's the knock-on costs of, like, what does it cost in terms of, like, increased healthcare spending, climate change, antibiotic resistance, rainforest deforestation, water use, etc. Like, trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars are being spent to fix the problems created by animal agriculture, to say nothing of the direct subsidies going to animal agriculture. So it's, future generations will look back and say, like, just simply like, what were you doing?
Dumb as a rock, right? Yeah. So we're back to amazement. Sometimes good amazement and sometimes complete bafflement as to why haven't we fixed something that so obviously doesn't work for us. And animals, obviously. And if you're an animal person, okay. But at the very least, care about yourself and your wallet. So your own health and your own wallet.
Well,
okay.
That's the thing, like, selfish, sociopathic narcissists should be vegan.
Right.
I mean,
this makes sense to me.
People who love animals should be vegan.
Sure.
But someone who doesn't care about animals at all should be vegan because it's better for their health, it's better for the environment, it's better for their appearance, it's better for everything. So...
And their wallet.
Yeah, like, in a way, if animals weren't involved, if there was just this industry that was causing all of the deleterious harm that's coming from animal agriculture, it would get shut down tomorrow.
Right, because it makes no sense.
Yep.
So we're on short and limited time here because I could have this conversation for a very long time. But I'm going to do a bunch of sort of off-the-cuff questions,
Sure.
quick, and you can just, first thing that pops into your head. And there's a bunch of them. So when someone's saying that they want to go plant-based, what are the words of advice that you give them?
It's hard to say, and I know this is supposed to be a quick response, but like, depends on the person, where they live, how old they are, what their cultural background is. You know, like, if it's a 20-year-old who lives in Los Angeles, my advice would be go vegan. Like, you got a million health food stores.
Do it.
You're young, you're smart, like, there's tons of restaurants, like, it's easy. If it's a 60-year-old who lives in Tulsa, I'm like, you know, maybe a gradual approach will make sense. Like, it's, I come back to that, the Voltaire quote that Obama paraphrased in his first inaugural address. He said, you know, don't let the pursuit of the perfect be the enemy of the good.
Oh, I like it.
You know,
yes,
so like if my aunt, who's in her 70s, wants to go vegan but knows nothing about it, I'm like, start slow, start small. Right. You know, like, do it in a way that's going to be sustainable, as opposed to, like, you know, making a radical change that you can't sustain. So then you go right back to the old way of doing things.
Right, absolutely. And for people who don't understand veganism, I feel like it's pretty misunderstood, which is why I do this series, so that we can bring some normalcy, humanity, etc. to it. Any words for people trying to wrap their mind around veganism and what it does?
Yeah, it's a way of eating that doesn't kill or harm animals. It's a way of eating that generally helps people live longer, to be happier, to avoid all sorts of health problems, to reduce rainforest deforestation, to reduce climate change, to reduce antibiotic use, to reduce water use. Like, it's
all of it.
It's you know, that's why we call it the Swiss Army knife of activism. Like, it affects everything.
Yeah, I always say, like, it's the smart choice for you. One and done. It's like the overall smart choice for you. Okay, these are going to be quick. What item are we always going to find in your fridge?
I know it's supposed to be quick. but I have so much stuff in my fridge.
Listen to you.
One item that you would always find in my fridge, some sort of dark green leafy vegetable.
Okay.
I don't know whether it's like chard, spinach, kale, whatever. That's something
It's okay.
like that's all.
We'll
it's
go
gonna
with
be
the
about.
overall dark, lean, green
Green
and
leafy,
leafy. What is your favorite go-to meal? So you've been out, you've been busy, you haven't really had time to cook or whatever. The thing you can always make at home super fast, you know it's good.
I make this thing. It's kimchi pasta fajoule. So it's like pasta with black beans and ginger kimchi and walnuts and olive oil. And it like sounds fancy. It actually takes about 10 minutes.
Oh, I'm gonna make that for my boyfriend who's a kimchi fanatic. Kimchi pasta fajoule. Okay, I like it. Favorite junk food, and if you don't do junk food, give me your favorite snack.
Favorite junk food would be every now and then vegan onion rings.
Ooh.
You know, it's like I remember when I was 8 or 9 years old eating my first onion ring, and I thought it was the greatest thing I'd ever eaten. So now once a year or so, if I'm out and I see vegan onion rings, I'll have some vegan onion rings.
Okay, fair. You're allowed. You're allowed. Do you have any pets? And if so, do you think they're any different than farm animals?
I do not have any companion animals. I live by Griffith Park, so I see coyotes, birds, hummingbirds, spiders, snakes, bobcats, all sorts of animals, all the time. And from my perspective, every being with 2 eyes and a central nervous system, and possibly even creatures who don't have 2 eyes and a central nervous system, but like at the bare minimum, every creature with 2 eyes and central nervous system, in my mind, they're not the same, but they're equal. You know, so like honestly, and I don't expect everyone to agree with this, but bees and spiders, cows, dogs, humans, monkeys, they all
same boat.
Have at the end of the day, they all want to be happy and be free from suffering. You know?
I do know.
And it, like, just take an ant. That ant, if you like scare it, it will run away. You know, if you hurt it somehow, it will clearly be in distress. Like every creature with 2 eyes and a central nervous system has that basic orientation, and they feel pain and they suffer, and at the very least, we shouldn't add to their suffering.
Completely agree. If you would like to be known for one bit of change in the world, what would that be?
I guess helping people to end the use of animals for human purposes.
And is that also what you consider to be your purpose in life?
I still don't know. I think that's certainly, that's what drives me, but it's the question of like the behavior and the mistake that fuels the behavior. You know, for example, like people, well, yeah, people eating garbage junk food, you know, people eating hot dogs, whatever. It's like you want to stop the behavior because it's killing them and killing the animals, but if you can change who they are underneath, that's when the real change happens.
I see.
You know, like, and so it's, you want to end the behavior. You know, like, for example, civil rights. It's much easier to really advance the cause of civil rights when you're dealing with people who aren't racists.
Right.
So if you can end racism, and that means healing the brokenness that compels someone to be racist, healing the brokenness that compels someone to hurt animals or to hurt children. It's like, so, you know, fix the person, the behavior will end.
You bring up something, I'm getting off my fast list here, but I would love this clarification. My understanding, and I really want to hear your perspective, very few people intentionally want to hurt animals. That's its own small, something is going on there. Most people, I think, are just uneducated about animals. Would you agree or no?
Yeah, and well, I don't know about uneducated, because everyone knows that to make animal products, you have to hurt and kill animals. You know, there's no...
Cognitive dissonance, can we say?
It's almost, and this is maybe a little too esoteric, but it's like, it's neural architecture. It's the way that our brain, you know, over billions of years has evolved. It prioritizes immediate well-being. You know, it prioritizes what feels good right now, which is why ostensibly self-interested people can smoke crack. You know, because like ultimately they want to be happy and live longer, but their brain is saying, oh, but that crack makes me feel good right now.
Right.
Which is why animal lovers can eat bacon, because the bacon bypasses their prefrontal cortex and goes right to much older parts of their brains and makes them feel good in that moment. So even if they know that they're hurting animals, they're killing themselves, they keep doing it because it's like a conditioned sort of like dopamine response.
It's a dopamine response, because in the long run, that cardiac disease doesn't feel so great, people.
No,
that's not helping you out.
And so it's almost like teaching people to sort of like move more into their prefrontal cortex, like the executive part of their brain, which says, oh, if you love animals, it is inconsistent to eat them. You know, if you want to be healthy, it's inconsistent to smoke crystal meth.
Right.
You know, like if you want to be a good person, it's inconsistent to punch your spouse. Like there's basic inconsistencies, but people get caught up in the short-term thinking.
Okay, so if we've learned anything here, if you'd like to be healthy, it is inconsistent to hurt animals or smoke crystal meth.
Yeah.
Just in case you missed that. What's the one thing that nobody knows about you that you're willing to say, or what you think that people don't know about you that is sort of out there, but they just don't see it?
I don't know. I mean, I've been such a like public loudmouth for such a long time. Like, I'm sure there's something, but let me think. I don't know.
Okay.
I really want to have a good sort of like book-ended answer to go out on, but I actually can't think of anything.
Okay, fair enough. This is really what we're going to go out on. What are your predictions for the future? And that could be tomorrow, or that could be 50 years from now. That could be about animals. That could be about music. Anything you want. What are your predictions for the future?
That the consequences of climate change are potentially going to end human life as we know it.
In our lifetime, or just
Pretty quick, next 30 years. It's going to get so bad people have no idea. Just to put it in perspective, the last time the Earth's climate had this high a concentration of CO2, sea levels were 280 feet higher.
Right.
So it's just a matter of time. The United States will become a desert. A few billion people will become either climate refugees or will be killed by a zoonotic disease or what have you. Like, we're coming to a head with antibiotic resistance,
Right.
climate change, desertification. My recommendation is start looking at condos in Yellowknife, Canada.
Really?
Yeah, the United States will become uninhabitable probably within the next 25 to 50 years. Largely. There'll be parts that might be okay, but like, it's because there's feedback loops where, like, you know, the climate is getting worse, and by the climate getting worse, it's creating circumstances that will make the climate worse. Like, one is the albedo effect. The albedo effect is that light surfaces reflect heat back out into outer space. As the polar ice caps melt, the Earth gets a lot darker, it absorbs more heat. Right. So climate change
keeps giving more climate change.
And then the permafrost, you know, methane, which is one of the reasons why animal agriculture is so terrible for the climate, but there's more methane in the permafrost than humans have released in the last 1,000 years. It's all melting. So it's about to get, and I kind of, honestly, I hate to say this, I've sort of thrown up my hands, because even if every government and every organization on the planet decided to fight against climate change, it's kind of too late. Like, we've already our species regarding climate jumped the shark a while ago.
We're on the way out, people. Literally and figuratively.
I mean, like, if I had to guess, I would say that in 100 years, the population of humans on the planet will be at least a third what it is today.
Amazing. Okay, so you all might live to experience that. I want to thank you so much for talking to me in a beautiful LA here. Moby, wonderful musician, veteran vegan, thank you for all you do for animals.
Oh, my pleasure.